Hey guys, hope you're doing well out there. I'm going to start right off the bat with a stop and jot question. My question is, what are some reasons relationships end? Okay, go ahead and pause it now and jot down a few reasons you can come up with for why relationships end. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've done that. Some of you may have put things like lying or maybe even an affair, something like that, which happens, but I think they're more unique instances. But hopefully someone just put that sometimes the two people have problems and they don't work them out, right? I think I've not done the research, but I'm guessing that's one of the biggest reasons why relationships end, okay? Now you might be thinking like, okay, why are we studying this? Why are we talking about this? What does this have to do with social studies? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want to use a relationship as an analogy for what the North and the South were experiencing at this time, okay? Because think about it, the North and the South were different, right? Just like in a relationship, both people are going to be a little different, but they're still like together and they're unified, right? The North and the South still agreed to be part of the same country and they were supposed to be working together to make things work, just like two different people come together, form a relationship, and work together. But just like sometimes problems arise in a relationship, the problems arise in the North and the South relationship too. And we've already started to see some of those issues. So what our lesson's going to get into today is we're going to start to look at their effort to come up with solutions, right? Because that's the first step. When you have conflict, you try to come up with solutions to fix it. And that's really today's focus. And actually, we're going to look at that not just today, for the next few days, what problems were arising and how did they try to solve them and see if they can keep it together. Now, I'm going to give a little spoiler alert. If you know a little bit about American history, they end up breaking apart because that's what the Civil War is about. One of them wanted to totally leave the country and they end up fighting a war over it. But we're still going to watch as things go and kind of see why things fell apart. Okay. So the essential question for today is actually it's by 1860, why were the nation's leaders unable to keep the Union together? So that's what our focus is trying to figure out. Why couldn't they keep it together? How did this thing fall apart? So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen real quick and refresh you guys on, so what are these problems they're having? Well, one was transportation, right? Remember the North wanted more roads and railroads to ship their goods because they didn't have the slow moving rivers that the South did to ship things in. I should say. Remember, tariffs became a big issue because the North wanted tariffs so that it would push companies in America to buy from Northern factories as opposed to buying those things from Europe. And of course, the South didn't like that because then that would make the things they're buying more expensive. And as you guys hopefully remember, it made it harder for them to sell their crops to Europe. And then the third one is slavery, which we know that at this point, all the northern states have outlawed slavery, but all the southern states still have slavery as legal. And that became a big problem because each wanted it the way they wanted it. So I will say that as we keep going, the tariffs and the slavery become more important than the transportation. And then as we continue to go, slavery ends up being the absolute most important thing that breaks them apart. But the tariffs was still an important aspect of this, and that's actually going to be our focus today. We're only going to look at the solutions Congress tried to come up with in regards to these problems that the North and the South were having over tariffs. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and do another stop and jot here. I want you to pause the video and jot down what a tariff is. Okay, go and do that now. Okay, I'm going to assume you have done that. So hopefully we remembered that a tariff is a tax on imported goods, right? It's a tax on goods that you would buy from a different country. So in this case, if a lot of people in America are getting their products from Europe, let's pick a country, even let's say England, America might say, we're going to put a tax on, a certain amount of goods or certain types of goods from England, which is going to make it now really expensive to buy from England. So those people are going to buy it from factories in America instead, right? And that's going to obviously benefit the North because we know the North has a lot more factories than the South, okay? So there's the big problem, right? The North wants those tariffs to help their factories out. The South doesn't want to have to pay more for the goods. They want to keep importing them from Europe. So, and then I have one vocab word. Yeah, let's go ahead and go to that now. So the only vocab word for today is nullify, and that means to cancel something. And in this particular context, we're going to see that the federal government, the national government, passed a law, which is supposed to mean that every state has to follow it if the national government passes a law. But we see in today's lesson, a state passes their own nullification law that nullifies that original law that the national government passed, which basically means that they're trying to say, we cancel the law here. Excuse me. They're saying, we're canceling that law. We're going to ignore it and not follow it. Okay, we don't agree to that law. So that word nullify is going to come up in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to actually go ahead and pull up this chart here, and I want you just to kind of follow along. This chart is actually a kind of chart that you're going to do tomorrow about the problems and solutions that Congress tried to come up with, about the solutions Congress tried to come up with for the issue of slavery. But today we're going to look at the solutions they came up with to solve the issue of tariffs. And so this one was more complex. So instead of making you guys do this whole chart, I decided I would go ahead and do the chart, go over it with you, and then I just have some comprehension questions that I want you to answer to show that you understand what I went over, okay? So it's important that you really track here and listen as I walk you through this whole big issue with tariffs and the solutions they tried to make, because then you're gonna have to answer some questions on it for homework. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start talking about this, and I'm actually going to see if I can kind of hide the right side here. I'm sure there's a better way of doing this, but because I'm going to ask you a question about something on the right side in a minute. So you notice just we start at the top and we move left. So there's always going to be a problem first. So I found that the problem was Northern manufacturers were upset because Southerners imported a lot of manufactured goods from Europe, right? We've talked about this. And because of this, Northern factories weren't making very much money. Okay, so Congress decided we want to find a solution to that problem. So what they did was they passed a law called the Tariff of 1828. And that doubled the cost of importing these foreign goods. So it made it very expensive to import those goods. So before I go to the result, I want you to kind of guess the result. So go ahead and pause the video and first just tell me, do you think the North was happy about this solution or upset about the solution? Go and do that now. Okay, I'm going to assume you've done that. Yeah, hopefully we said happy, right? Because they were the ones who were upset in the first place because they weren't getting enough sales from their manufactured goods. And so if Congress is passing a tariff that will force Americans to buy more from American companies or from American factories, that's going to help the North out. They're going to make more money. Let's try, though, one more stop and jot for this one. Go ahead and pause the video and write down whether you think the South would be happy or upset about this tariff law passed. Okay, I'm going to assume that you did that as well. And hopefully you said that they will not be happy because, as we talked about, for the South, they're the ones oftentimes buying a lot of these goods. You know, like I said, the farmers might be getting a plow or, you know, so on and so forth, lots of various goods for running their farm. Instead of being able to buy it for cheap from Europe, now it's made it really expensive to buy it from Europe. So they're going to have to buy it from American factories again, and they're going to pay more money to do that. So I'm just going to show you that real quick. So we saw a problem. We saw what Congress passed as the solution. They're like, well, if the North is upset, then let's pass this tariff and let's help them out. And then the result was that, like I said, the North ends up happy because now they're getting more sales, but the South ends up upset because now they have to pay more for their manufactured goods. And also, Europe was now unable to buy as much cotton from the South because they were hurt by the tariff too. And so the South is also having more trouble selling their crops. So we have a couple issues there for the South. So this issue isn't over yet because, as you might guess, I'm going to go ahead and block this right side off again. As you might guess, a new problem arose after that, and that's that now the South was upset because of the impacts of the tariff, okay? They're mad because now this is hurting them. So it's like, okay, Congress is like, oh, I thought we fixed the last problem, but now we've created a new problem. So now they come up with another solution. So we've got the solution in the middle. They made a compromise in 1832, which lowered the tariff. So they're like, okay, let's make the tariff a little less expensive, and then maybe some Southerners will still be able to get some goods for cheaper from Europe, and we kind of maybe make everybody happy there. So again, let's do one more stop and jot. Do you think that the South would be happy about this or be upset about this? Go and do that now. Okay, so hopefully you put happy, because that is the logical answer there, because this entire solution was made in order to make them happy. Although I will say that, interestingly enough, not everybody was entirely happy from the South. It says here this made some in the South happy, but many wanted it lowered even more or removed altogether. Okay, so some were like, no, that's still not good enough. So this solution, they thought is going to fix everything, didn't quite fix everything. And so the South is still upset that this tariff is as high as it is. So the South does something that creates a new problem. It says here, the last row, some Southerners thought the tariff law was unconstitutional, so South Carolina decided to nullify the tariff law, which means they canceled it and didn't follow it. So there's our vocab word, ding, ding, ding. They said, we are going to nullify this law. We don't believe you have the right to do this, so we're not going to follow it, okay? Now, the North, of course, wasn't happy about that because they didn't believe states can just nullify federal laws, right? So what they did is the president, Andrew Jackson, started to gather up troops, and he was going to send troops in to invade South Carolina. So we're going to have like a mini war here between the national government and the state of South Carolina. So we have a new problem, right? That's not good. We don't want that to happen. So again, Congress is like, let's fix this. Let's do something so we don't have this big bloody war in our own country. So they come up with one last compromise. In 1833, it says a compromise was reached, and basically Congress lowered the tariff even more. So they made it the tax even less, to the point where South Carolina said, fine, we will accept the law now that the tariff has been lowered even more. We will no longer nullify it. We're going to remove our law we made that nullified the tariff. So this should be like, this feels like we're starting to get a pretty good solution here. I kind of put in under the result is this did solve this specific issue. It prevented the war. It made it so that everybody was at least somewhat happy. There was still a tariff which helped northern factories, but it wasn't so high that it really hurt the Southerners. So that's not a bad result in the end. The only issue, though, is I put here, however, it didn't address the deeper issue, which was that the South believed a state could nullify federal laws and the North believed a state couldn't. So even though the South said, we won't nullify this specific law anymore because you lowered the tariff, they still believed, like, but if there's another law the federal government makes again that we don't like, we're going to nullify it. And the North still felt, no, states can't do that. So there's a problem here about how much power the national government actually has. And for the Southerners, many of them felt like the states should have more control and more power. And we'll see later that that deeper issue is going to continue to cause problems, okay? So we may have fixed this specific problem at hand, but we're still seeing issues overall between the relationship of the North and the South. Hopefully that made sense. If not, you're going to be working through it again when you do the assignment today, so you'll have a chance to keep kind of processing this and understanding it. But I'm going to go ahead and show you what that assignment looks like. So it's just here, it just says tariff chart comprehension questions. So I've attached this problem solution chart, which I did, and you're going to be able to view this, and then you're going to use all this information. You're going to read it again, and you're going to go through and answer these 6 questions. And those 6 questions are the way for me to make sure you really understood what I went over in that chart and what, you know, we saw between the North and the South and the solutions Congress tried to pass related to tariffs. Okay. I normally would do like a separate video where I read this text out loud for you guys. But I just went ahead and read through it as a part of this lesson. So I'm not going to make a separate video. You guys can just go ahead and rewind this video when you start working on your assignment, and you can listen to me go over it again if you prefer to hear it read aloud as opposed to just pulling the document up on your own and reading it. Okay, that's all I've got for today. You need to be working on your tariff chart comprehension questions, making sure it all makes sense and you can explain it in your own words. If you've got questions, just send me a message on Google Classroom. All right, see you guys.